Okay, this is part 4. We're about to do it now. You ready? I'm ready. Video.
So, is the greatest medal in the world in danger of becoming extinct? Will those 7 in the safe at Hancock's Jewellers ever be engraved?
I think it would be quite wrong to say that there will never be an opportunity for a Victoria Cross to be won in future warfare. There will be opportunities. There will always be personal braveries in an intensive operation, a long drawn-out operation, that deserves that reward.
There would be certainly plenty in this generation who would be candidates for being awarded a Victoria Cross. Courage isn't lost from mankind. It's just the circumstances.
Back on the banks of the Rhine, Major Robert Kane was into the 3rd day of the siege of Oosterbeek, and the Germans had changed their tactics. Possibly fed up with losing so many tanks, they decided to batter the British into submission with constant shelling and mortar fire. The Germans, by this stage, had ringed the British positions with 100 artillery guns, along with 12 of the dreaded Nebelwerfers, multi-barreled mortars which fired 6 bombs at a time.
Wow. Oh. No. Let's get back to the video. Okay.
Somehow this bombardment seemed to inspire Kane, driving him to ever greater feats of bravery. While most of the troops kept their heads...
What did he do? Catch one and then turn around and throw it back at him?
down and their fingers crossed, hoping a shell wouldn't land on them, he went in search of tanks. Witnesses spoke of a madman running through a hailstorm of fire in these very streets with his trousers torn off, blood pouring from wounds in his legs, firing his Piat at tank after tank after tank.
And they said he's firing, some were saying he's firing the Piat from the hip, like a bloody cowboy.
There was this figure, wounded, bandaged, dirty, dishevelled, but still coming round, still wherever the point of danger was, still encouraging the men all the time.
Some were saying he'd knocked 4, 5, 6 tanks out.
Yeah, you can put yourself in the Germans' position and saying, whoever's knocking out these tanks must be, well, someone out of this world, I'll say.
In his diary, he says his feet felt like they had 1,000 pins sticking in them and that his socks filled with blood. Later in the day, he says he felt something hot and sticky running down the side of his face. Turns out he'd fired so many shells, one of his eardrums had burst.
He disregarded his own wounds. He was wounded, seriously wounded and bleeding and torn to shreds, yet he fought on because that was his duty. He refused to go back for medical treatment until there was a lull in the battle. He fought with a total focus on what he was meant to be doing, and many VC holders have this sense of focus. They have a focus that sees that clearly what they've got to do, and they must do that regardless of the effect it has on his own life. And this selflessness is perhaps the key issue in winning a VC.
To understand just how important this business of selflessness is, you need to know the story of John Cruikshank.
Okay, we're about to learn another
Cruikshank
one.
was the captain of a Catalina flying boat, which was very badly shot up during a suicidal attack on a U-boat. Although he sank the U-boat, one of his crew was killed, 3 others injured, and Cruikshank himself was hit 72 times, including wounds to both lungs. So there he is, with his lungs hemorrhaging, slipping in and out of consciousness and barely able to breathe. But he was determined to bring the wounded crew home safely, so he kept the plane in the air for an hour until the sea conditions were safe enough for a landing. And that's an amazing story, but it's not as amazing as what the Secretary of State has written here. He says, "I think that the VC has been earned in this case. although an element of self-preservation enters into it. And that's the tricky bit. You see, if you're the captain of an aeroplane, you bring it back and therefore save the lives of everyone on board. You also save your own life. You can't really win.
What did they want him to do? Crash it into the water? Then save everyone? And while he was swimming everyone back, go ahead and perform surgery on himself at the same time? Can we not just marvel at what he did? He deserved one. If he didn't, which I'm sure, yes, he got one, but he deserved it.
Arnhem was a lost cause too. There were so many wounded British soldiers by the 4th day of the siege that the Germans sportingly arranged a ceasefire so they could be evacuated. Kane could have gone. He was a wreck. He was half blind, he was half deaf, his legs were perforated with machine gun and shrapnel wounds. But he chose to stay, and that meant he was still here on the 5th day of the siege. This, in the Germans' eyes, was doomsday, the day when they'd mount their biggest push. They threw everything at the British: tanks, artillery, flamethrowers, mortars, the lot. The British had arrived in Arnhem with supplies for 3 days. This was their 9th and the 5th in the hell of Oosterbeek. It was shaping up to be the shortest firefight in history. But Major Kane had other ideas. Kane found himself down by the church, and pretty soon he was out of ammunition for his Piat. So he switched to a mortar like this. Now, the idea of a mortar is that you jam it into the ground, you drop the shell into the tube, it fires up in the air and lands on the German positions. But the Germans were so close that he was firing it like this, like a normal gun. Now, imagine what that must have looked like from a German's point of view. This man with his trousers blown off, caked in blood, with sticky stuff coming down the side of his face, firing a mortar horizontally at you. It must have been unnerving. In Kane's VC citation, it says of the events of that day, by a skillful use of this weapon and his daring leadership of the few men still under his command, he completely demoralized the enemy, who, after an engagement lasting more than 3 hours, withdrew in disorder.
Wow.
Robert Kane had turned the tide in the battle, and this is another vital factor in winning a Victoria Cross. Your actions have to create a ripple effect. They have to help save the day.
On the Monday, it was the final day of the battle, and the Germans, that was 9th SS Panzer Division, have been trying since the Friday to break Major Kane's block, because that was the key to cutting us off from the whole division off from the river, and we would have been finished. We all knew that. I mean, it was obvious to us all, but he made sure that they didn't get through, to his great credit.
His action had tremendous impact on the troops as a whole, and probably helped them keep their resolve and help win the battle out of proportion to the size of his own personal command.
It was the most...
Help the other soldiers keep the resolve. Yeah. Because if you're seeing one guy do that, you have to think, well, why can't I do that? Why is it just him doing that? And if he goes down, the bravery, everything for the remaining men, gone. But you have to think, why can't I do that? Why can't I will get shot, I'll get this, but I'll be alive. Because look at him. Look what he's doing. He's fighting like a madman.
Wonderful example to everyone.
A major firing at tanks is something you don't hear of, really.
We all wanted to emulate him, of course, which we tried to do to our best ability. The effect that Major Robert Kane had on the men was obviously his leadership, and the fact that they were on the defensive, but he was moving, he was showing himself, he was rallying where there was the greatest danger, and that has the most huge impact upon people who have just got to stay there and endure and be brave. They need something to focus upon. He was that focus.
Yes.
He led by example completely. I mean, I'm sure that whoever got back over that river of the South Staffords could owe that fact to Bob Kane. Nobody else, because it was his example that rallied them.
He could lead any unit in any time into any battle, and the men would see how he fights and react to it. It would push them to fight harder. I really believe that about him. That put him in any situation, in any circumstance, and he would make you step up. But not by forcing you to. He would make you step up by his own example. And you would just think, like as I said, if he can do it, why can't I?
His bravery was suicidal and utterly selfless. His tank-killing antics rallied the troops, beat off the enemy, and helped keep the defences at Oosterbeek intact. These were the reasons why this man won a Victoria Cross.
And not just any VC either. According to his commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Derek McCarty, it was the finest Victoria Cross of the whole war.
After the Germans withdrew, the British, out of ammo, food and ideas, and knowing by this stage that the Second Army wasn't coming, silently crossed the river at night to safety. Kane knew they were retreating, but he didn't want to look beaten.
When they were in utter defeat by the river, withdrawing over the river, the battle was lost. He found a razor, and somehow he shaved, so that at least he would go back looking respectable and like an officer above his men. Amazing man.
Kane was awarded his Victoria Cross at Buckingham Palace on the 2nd of November 1944, the first Manxman ever to get one. But like many other VC winners, he was never very comfortable with all the ballyhoo and fuss. Kane was the only one of 5 VC winners at Arnhem who lived to tell the tale. Not that he would tell the tale, of course. VC winners rarely do. And that's a pity, because Kane's tale is one of how many more young men, how many more teenage soldiers might have died had he not fought quite so ferociously. After the war, he left the army and went back to working for Shell in Nigeria and the
Oh, I was so sure they were going to say, yeah, and in the next battle he was killed instantly. He survived. He survived. Thank goodness.
Far East. He died of cancer in 1974.
Sadly, that meant I never met him, which is a shame for 2 reasons. Firstly, because I'm absolutely fascinated by VC winners. And secondly, because I'm married to his daughter. She didn't even know he'd won a Victoria Cross until after he'd died. He never thought to mention it.
You know, we've a rather warped sense of what constitutes bravery these days. I mean, even David Beckham is called a hero for scoring a penalty. But when you look at VC winners and hear their stories, well, enough said.
Wow. What a twist at the end, though. He's married to his daughter. And he never told her. There's something about some people, they get those medals and it doesn't, I mean, it means something to them, but when you get that medal, there's no need to brag about it. There's no need to tell people, yeah, I've got it. That's in record. People want to know, they can find out. You don't need to tell anyone. Wow. Sucks that he died of cancer. I don't know how old he was, though. I wasn't paying attention to that. But I would like to know that he lived a long life, but I don't know. Well, this is good. This is sad. It was also amazing. It truly is incredible stories. Wow. Well, I'm gonna end this here. Like and subscribe, and think if you have any more of these. And don't recommend this video, because even though I'd probably do it again, but don't do that. But yeah, share if you got something, leave a comment, and yeah, have a good day, have a good night.